Question number...
Sorry, 600,000 houses.
Question number 5, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand we're meant to use these microphones.
Yeah, I do apologise for that, but it is to make certain that the member will be heard on television. Dr. Russell Norman.
It is the end of school, isn't it, for the week? So, yeah. All right. To the Minister of Finance.
Order.
To the Minister of Finance.
Order. Order. That's enough.
That's where all your mates are.
No, order. So, the member was provoked. I accept that, but this must stop. I want to hear Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Finance. Does he agree with the Prime Minister that the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is worth about US $2.9 billion to the New Zealand economy? If so, has he or the Treasury seen this forecasting?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I have seen the forecast, and I agree with the Prime Minister that it suggests that New Zealand's membership of the TPP could be worth $2.9 billion, or 1.4% of GDP, I think, by 2025. I also agree with both the Prime Minister and Minister of Trade, Tim Grosser, that economic models are not perfect. Sometimes they undershoot the benefits and sometimes they overshoot it. They undershot the benefits in calculating the value of the closer economic relationship with Australia back in the 80s. We believe that the negotiations reflect the importance of the TPP. If economies come together in a trade deal that represents around 21 trillion of GDP, then we're likely to be better off inside it than outside it.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the name of the report that the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance was referencing with regard to this forecasting?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I can refer to a report I have here, completed, I think, by the East-West Centre. I can't give the member the name of a report. It sets out a range of scenarios, and the one that the Prime Minister referred to was what you would regard as a medium scenario, not one of the more optimistic ones.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If indeed the report was from the East-West Centre and was called the Trans-Pacific Partnership and Asia-Pacific Integration, a quantitative assessment, has he read the results of the report which show that the baseline case, that is New Zealand without a TPP, still results in a $2.2 billion gain to the New Zealand economy compared to the claimed gain of around 2.8, 2.9 inside the TPP?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, no, I haven't read the report myself, and I'd have to check with the Prime Minister to check whether he has. We're following a policy where we believe that getting better access for our exporters to large markets is going to be better for New Zealand, because in the long run we have to earn an income, and it is one of those things that the government can do to support businesses. I understand that the Greens have a different view. And if the member became a Minister of Finance, he'd probably pull us out of free trade agreements. I doubt that anyone believes that would be good for the economy.
The Minister shouldn't be speculating on that. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Finance, does he agree with the demands of American drug companies involved in the TPP negotiations that there needs to be a, and I quote, fairer process and more transparency, end of quotes, around Pharmac?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, if the government agreed completely with the demands of American pharmaceutical companies, the negotiation would probably be over. It isn't, and it is a long, complex negotiation, and the New Zealand government's position is to preserve the role and effectiveness of Pharmac.
Supplementary.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of the East-West report showing relatively small gains of being inside the TPP, does he agree further, or has rather he read the Australian Productivity Commission report, which found that this kind of economic modelling was used to oversell the benefits of these kind of agreements, which was produced by the Australian Productivity Commission with regard to bilateral and regional trade agreements?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not unusual for us to disagree, actually, with Australian views about modelling. We've been going through one of those over the having a common investment market between Australia and New Zealand. Regardless of the contest of spreadsheets, we believe free trade's a good idea. It's served our exporters well, and we want to continue with it because it provides jobs and incomes. We understand the member's position. He's opposed to more jobs and more incomes from free trade and would pull New Zealand out of free trade agreements.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Given the Minister's answer to my first supplementary question, if concessions are agreed to and the American drug companies are given a legal right to attack Farm Act processes and be part of those processes, will the government be able to claim that it's defended Farm Act rather than having sold Farm Act down the river?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is a bit hypothetical. I mean, if you don't do something, you can't claim you haven't done it. The fact is, we are protecting Farm Act's role. Any trade negotiation amounts to weighing up compromises you might have to make of your own direct interests with the larger benefits in the long term of our exporters in a small economy at the end of the world being able to access large markets where it's easier to sell our products for higher prices, because that flows back to jobs and incomes in New Zealand. And I own up to the fact that in this negotiation we are focused on more jobs and higher incomes. We accept that the opposition parties aren't.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Minister given consideration that these kind of agreements may involve benefits, but they may also involve risks? And one of those risks is the risk that was alluded to in the previous question, which is the attack on Farm Act, which could cost the New Zealand government many hundreds of millions of dollars if it loses the ability to use Farm Act to drive down the price of pharmaceuticals.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Minister looked at the costs and risks around Farm Act with regard to the costs that may come from investor-state disputes actions? And in that light, is he aware of the recent decision to award costs against the government of Ecuador for $2.4 billion as a result of a case that was brought by an oil company?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes and yes.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Dr. Russel Norman.
I seek leave to table the working paper from the East-West Centre about the potential benefits of the TPP.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Dr. Russel Norman, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the government's analysis of the benefits and costs of the TPP, what consideration did they give to the decision by the Australian federal government to refuse to sign up to investor-state disputes provisions, because that government took the view that the risks to the Australian economy are too great to sign up to investor-state dispute provisions?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member can be assured that the risks have been studied extensively. The whole business of negotiating these agreements is precisely to weigh up the benefits with the costs. But I have to say, a New Zealand government has not yet signed a free trade agreement that was not beneficial to New Zealand. And given our objectives of more jobs and higher incomes, we'll continue to negotiate through this agreement, bearing in mind the risks. And it's hard to understand why the Greens' Labor opposition seem to be moving to positions of opposing free trade agreements when they have such a track record of success for New Zealand.
Point of order, Dr. Russel Norman.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave to table a document from the International Centre for the Settlement of Investment Disputes dated 5th of October 2012 regarding the decision in the case against Ecuador, where Ecuador lost a case of $2.4 billion.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Maggie Barry.
Speaker, thank you. My question
number 6, I beg your pardon, Maggie Barry.
Thank you. My question